The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as William stood by the tall windows of his private study. His hands trembled slightly as he held the letter that had arrived just hours before. The words seemed to blur together as he read them for the third time, each reading making the reality more painful. Kate found him there, still in his morning clothes, staring out at the gardens where they had once played with their children on happier days. She approached quietly, her bare feet making no sound on the polished wooden floor. Without speaking, she placed her hand gently on his shoulder, feeling the tension that had settled there like a heavy weight. William turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw the same mixture of grief and determination that she had witnessed during their most difficult moments together. The letter slipped from his fingers and floated to the floor between them. The news had spread quickly through the palace staff, though they tried their best to maintain their usual routines. Servants moved through the hallways with hushed voices and careful steps, understanding that something significant had changed in their world. The children sensed the shift too, asking fewer questions than usual and staying closer to their parents during breakfast. Even the family dogs seemed to pick up on the somber mood, lying quietly by the fireplace instead of their usual playful antics. Kate picked up the fallen letter and smoothed it against her dress. She had known this day would come eventually, but knowing something and experiencing it were entirely different things. The weight of responsibility that came with their positions had always been present, but now it felt heavier than ever before. She thought about all the preparations they would need to make, all the people they would need to speak with, and all the emotions they would need to manage while the world watched their every move. As the day progressed, meetings were called and arrangements began to take shape. Palace officials moved efficiently through their tasks, but there was an underlying current of sadness that touched everyone involved. William and Kate found themselves in constant consultation with advisors, protocol officers, and family members. Each conversation brought new details to consider and new challenges to navigate. Through it all, they remained side by side, drawing strength from each other in the way that had sustained them through years of public life. The afternoon brought a brief moment of quiet when they stepped outside together. The gardens were in full bloom, a stark contrast to the heaviness they carried in their hearts. Kate noticed how William's shoulders seemed to straighten when they were alone together, away from the endless stream of officials and obligations. They walked slowly along the familiar paths, each lost in their own thoughts but connected by the shared understanding of what lay ahead. Evening approached with the knowledge that tomorrow would bring the beginning of a very public process. The world would be watching, expecting them to handle their grief with the grace and dignity that their positions demanded. As they prepared for bed, Kate watched William in the mirror as he slowly removed his watch, a gift he had treasured for many years. His movements were careful and deliberate, as if he were already practicing the measured pace that the coming days would require. In the quiet of their bedroom, away from the eyes of staff and advisors, they finally allowed themselves to feel the full weight of their loss. William sat on the edge of their bed and spoke quietly about memories that had suddenly become precious in a way they never had been before. Kate listened, offering comfort through her presence and understanding. They both knew that their private moments of grief would be limited in the days to come, making this quiet time together all the more valuable. The children had been told earlier in the day, and their questions and concerns added another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. As parents, William and Kate wanted to shield their children from as much pain as possible, while still helping them understand the significance of what was happening. They spoke in simple terms about loss and remembrance, about duty and love, and about how families support each other during difficult times. Before sleep finally came, they stood together at their bedroom window, looking out at the same view William had contemplated that morning. The palace grounds were now bathed in moonlight, peaceful and still. Tomorrow would bring the formal announcement and the beginning of a very public period of mourning. But tonight they held each other close, gathering strength for the journey ahead and finding comfort in the certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together with all the grace they could summon. The official announcement came at precisely 10 in the morning, delivered through the formal channels that had carried such news for generations. Within minutes, the statement appeared on screens across the world, and the carefully chosen words began to echo through news broadcasts in dozens of languages. William and Kate watched from a small viewing room as the first reports began to appear. their faces reflecting the strange mixture of relief and apprehension that comes when a difficult truth finally becomes public knowledge. Phone calls started immediately, flooding the palace switchboard with condolences from world leaders, family members, and friends from every corner of their lives. Each conversation required its own careful balance of gratitude and composure, and William found himself repeating similar phrases of thanks while Kate made notes about arrangements and obligations that seemed to multiply with each passing hour. The children were kept close but shielded from the intensity of the media response that was already building outside the palace gates. By noon, crowds had begun to gather at the main entrances, bringing flowers and handwritten messages that palace staff collected throughout the day. The outpouring of public sympathy was both touching and overwhelming, a reminder of how deeply their family was woven into the fabric of public consciousness. Kate walked past windows overlooking the growing memorial and felt moved by the simple gestures of respect from people who had traveled from across the country to pay their respects. The afternoon brought a series of meetings with protocol officials who guided them through the complex arrangements that would need to be made in the coming days. Every detail had significance, from the order of processional elements to the specific wording of various statements. William listened carefully to each explanation while Kate took detailed notes, both of them understanding that their personal preferences would need to be balanced against centuries of tradition and public expectations. Family members began arriving as evening approached, each bringing their own grief and their own questions about how best to honor what had been lost. Conversations took place in quiet corners of the palace, voices kept low out of respect and necessity. The children moved between these adult discussions and their own quiet play, adapting to the changed atmosphere with the remarkable resilience that young people often display during difficult times. Dinner was a subdued affair, with extended family gathered around a table that seemed larger than usual despite being full. Conversations touched on memories and plans in equal measure, and William found himself studying the faces of people he had known his entire life, seeing them differently now that their shared loss had created new bonds of understanding. Kate noticed how the children listened more carefully than usual to the adult conversations, sensing the importance of what was being discussed even when they didn't fully understand the details. The media presence outside grew throughout the day, with broadcast trucks lining nearby streets and reporters delivering updates against the backdrop of the palace walls. Inside, staff members worked to maintain normal routines while accommodating the increased security measures and communication demands that the situation required. The contrast between the quiet efficiency of palace operations and the growing public attention created a strange sense of being at the center of a storm while remaining somehow removed from its full intensity. Evening. Planning sessions focused on the practical aspects of the days ahead, from transportation arrangements to guest accommodations. Each decision carried weight beyond its immediate practical implications, as William and Kate understood that their choices would be analyzed and remembered for years to come. They consulted with advisors about precedent and protocol, while trying to maintain their own sense of what would be most meaningful and appropriate. Private time became increasingly precious as the day wore on, with brief moments stolen between official obligations taking on heightened significance. Kate found herself memorizing small details about these quiet interactions, understanding instinctively that the coming days would be filled with public performance, and that these genuine moments of connection would become even more valuable. William seemed to be doing the same, his attention more focused than usual on the faces and voices of the people closest to him. As the palace prepared for sleep, security briefings addressed the logistics of managing increased public attention while maintaining the family's safety and privacy. The balance between public accessibility and personal protection required constant adjustment, and William and Kate worked closely with security personnel to ensure that their children could maintain some sense of normalcy during an inherently abnormal time. The last task of the day involved reviewing the schedule for the morning, which would begin a series of public appearances designed to acknowledge the outpouring of public sympathy while moving forward with the formal processes that the situation demanded. Kate laid out clothes that would strike the right tone of respectful mourning while remaining practical for a long day of public interaction. William spent time with the children, answering their questions about the next day and reassuring them about the changes that were already beginning to reshape their daily routines. The morning air felt crisp against their faces as William and Kate stepped outside for their first public appearance since the announcement. The crowd that had gathered overnight erupted in respectful applause, a sound that seemed to wrap around them like an unexpected embrace. Kate had chosen a simple dark dress that conveyed appropriate solemnity, while allowing her to move comfortably through what would be a long day of public interaction. William walked beside her with measured steps, acknowledging the crowd's sympathy with gentle nods and occasional words of thanks. The sea of flowers that had accumulated since the previous day was breathtaking in its scope and variety. Bouquets ranged from elaborate professional arrangements to simple wildflowers picked from home gardens, each representing someone's desire to express sympathy and respect. Children in the crowd held homemade cards and drawings, their artwork depicting hearts and rainbows alongside carefully written messages of support. Kate knelt down to receive several of these offerings directly from young hands, her genuine warmth creating moments of connection that would be remembered long after the formal ceremonies concluded. As they moved through the crowd, William and Kate encountered people who had traveled great distances to be present for this moment. An elderly woman from Scotland pressed a small tartan ribbon into Kate's hand, explaining quietly that it had belonged to her late husband, who had served in the military for 40 years. A young father lifted his toddler so the child could see over the crowd, and William paused to speak a few words to both of them about the importance of remembering and honoring those we lose. The international media presence was substantial, with photographers and camera crews documenting every gesture and expression. William and Kate had long since learned to be conscious of this scrutiny, without allowing it to dominate their behavior, but today the attention felt more intense than usual. Every pause, every smile, every moment of visible emotion would be analyzed and interpreted across multiple platforms. They moved through their public interactions with the careful grace that their positions required while trying to maintain the genuine connection that made these encounters meaningful. Palace staff worked efficiently in the background, coordinating logistics and managing the flow of people and information. Security personnel maintained discreet but vigilant oversight, ensuring that the public's desire to express sympathy could be accommodated safely. The children remained inside during these public appearances, following a schedule designed to give them age-appropriate involvement in the proceedings without exposing them to the intensity of continuous media attention midday. Brought a series of formal meetings with dignitaries and officials who had arrived to offer condolences on behalf of various organizations and governments. Each meeting followed established protocols while allowing for personal expressions of sympathy and support. William found these interactions both draining and meaningful, as they required him to shift repeatedly between his public role and his private grief. Kate served as his steady partner throughout these encounters, reading social cues and providing subtle support when the emotional weight of the day began to show. The afternoon schedule included a visit to view some of the memorial displays that had been created by community groups and organizations. Local schools had contributed artwork and written tributes that demonstrated how deeply the loss had affected people of all ages. A nearby church had opened its doors for quiet reflection, and William and Kate spent a few minutes in the peaceful sanctuary, appreciating the temporary refuge from public attention, while acknowledging the prayers and good wishes that had been offered there. Regional representatives brought unique tributes from their communities, including traditional crafts and local specialties that reflected the diverse ways people chose to express their sympathy. A group of musicians had gathered to perform traditional songs of remembrance, their harmonies carrying across the palace grounds and adding a layer of beauty to what could have been an overwhelmingly somber day. Kate listened with visible appreciation, understanding that music has a unique power to express emotions that words cannot fully capture. Evening brought family time that felt both precious and complicated by the day's public demands. The children shared their own experiences of the day, asking questions about why so many people had come to visit and what would happen in the days ahead. William and Kate worked together to provide honest but age-appropriate explanations, helping their children understand that public grief is different from private grief but equally valid and important. Dinner conversation centered around the day's interactions and the plans for the following day, which would involve even more formal ceremony and public participation. Extended family members shared their observations about the public response, noting the genuine affection and respect that had been displayed throughout the day. The children contributed their own perspectives, offering insights that reminded the adults about the importance of finding moments of lightness even during serious times. The day concluded with quiet reflection time for William and Kate, who used the evening hours to process the emotional demands of public grieving while maintaining their connection to each other and their own private feelings about their loss. They reviewed photographs from the day's events, seeing their public interactions through a different lens and noting moments they had been too busy to fully appreciate while they were happening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to demonstrate the grace and dignity that the situation demanded. But tonight they focused on gathering strength for whatever lay ahead. The cathedral bells began ringing early in the morning, their deep tones carrying across the city and marking the beginning of what would be the most significant day in the formal farewell process. William stood at his bedroom window listening to the familiar sound that had marked important moments throughout his life, feeling the weight of tradition and expectation settling around him like a ceremonial robe. Kate joined him at the window, and together they watched as the first groups of people began gathering along the processional route, many having arrived before dawn to secure good viewing positions. Preparations within the palace moved with the precision of a carefully rehearsed performance, though everyone understood that this was not theater, but real life unfolding under extraordinary circumstances. Kate's lady's maid helped her into the formal attire that had been selected weeks earlier, but now carried new significance. Every element of her appearance had been considered not just for its aesthetic impact, but for its symbolic meaning and its appropriateness for the solemn occasion. William dressed with similar care, checking each detail while his valet ensured that every aspect of his uniform met the exacting standards that the day required. The children were prepared with special attention to their comfort and understanding of what would be expected of them during the public portions of the ceremony. Palace staff had worked to create a balance between including them meaningfully in the proceedings while protecting them from aspects that might be too overwhelming for their ages. Kate spent extra time with each child individually, answering questions and providing reassurance about their roles in the day's events. Transportation arrangements required coordination with security services and city officials to ensure that the processional route remained both accessible to the public and safe for all participants. William and Kate reviewed the timeline one final time, understanding that while careful planning had gone into every detail, the emotional reality of the day might require adjustments to their expectations about how they would feel and react during key moments. The formal ceremony began with the arrival of international representatives and family members who had come to participate in this final farewell. Each arrival was noted by the media and the gathered crowds, creating a sense of mounting significance as the time for the main event approached. William and Kate served as hosts even in their grief, greeting each visitor personally and ensuring that everyone felt welcomed and appropriately honored for their presence. Musical preparations included rehearsals of traditional pieces that had been selected for their emotional resonance and their connection to the person being honored. The cathedral choir had practiced for weeks to ensure that their performance would provide the right combination of solemnity and beauty. Kate listened to a brief rehearsal and felt moved by the power of voices united in tribute, understanding that music would help carry emotions that individual words could not fully express. The processional itself became a journey through the city that allowed thousands of people to participate in the farewell from their positions along the route. William and Kate moved slowly enough to acknowledge the crowds while maintaining the dignified pace that the occasion required. The response from the public was overwhelming in its respectful enthusiasm, with people of all ages showing their support through applause, thrown flowers, and visible emotion that reflected their own sense of loss and connection. Inside the cathedral, the ceremony unfolded with the grandeur and solemnity that centuries of tradition had perfected. William and Kate took their designated places among family and international guests, surrounded by the architectural beauty and spiritual significance of a space that had witnessed countless important moments throughout history. The formal liturgy provided structure for collective grief while allowing for personal reflection and private prayer. Eulogies and readings had been carefully chosen to honor the complexity of a life lived in public service while acknowledging the private person who had been loved by family and friends. William listened to speakers who had known different aspects of the person being honored, Understanding that public figures exist in many different relationships and contexts simultaneously, Kate paid attention to the reactions of the children, ensuring that they were managing the emotional intensity of the formal ceremony while participating meaningfully in this important family moment. The cathedral's acoustics amplified every element of the service, from spoken words to musical performances to the rustling of programs and the quiet sounds of people managing their emotions. William found himself particularly moved by moments of silence that allowed the full weight of the occasion to settle over the assembled congregation. These pauses in the formal program created space for personal reflection and private farewell that complemented the public nature of the ceremony. As the service concluded, William and Kate prepared for the final processional that would mark the end of the formal farewell ceremony. They knew that this conclusion would be both an ending and a beginning, closing this chapter of public mourning while opening a new phase of carrying forward the legacy and responsibilities that they had inherited. The weight of that transition was present in their minds as they prepared to step back into the public eye for the ceremonial conclusion of this significant day. The final processional moved through streets lined with people who had waited hours to witness this concluding moment of the formal farewell. William and Kate walked with measured steps that honored both the solemnity of the occasion and the patience of the crowds who had gathered to show their respect. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones of the cathedral steps as they emerged from the ceremony, creating a visual backdrop that seemed to underscore the historic significance of the moment they were experiencing together. Children in the crowd waved small flags and held flowers that their parents had helped them prepare for this moment. Kate noticed a little girl who could not have been more than 5 years old, standing on her father's shoulders and carefully holding a single white rose. When their eyes met, the child offered a shy smile that seemed to bridge the distance between the formal ceremony and the human connections that made such moments truly meaningful. William acknowledged a group of veterans who had positioned themselves along the route, their respectful salutes creating a powerful tribute that spoke to lifetime service and shared understanding of duty. The carriage ride that followed provided a brief respite from the intense public attention while still allowing continued interaction with the crowds. Kate used this time to collect herself emotionally, while remaining visible to the people who had invested so much of their own time and energy in being present for this farewell. William sat beside her with the quiet dignity that had carried him through the most difficult moments of the day, occasionally pointing out particularly touching displays of support or remarkable examples of public participation in their shared experience of loss and remembrance. Palace staff had worked throughout the day to manage the logistics of the large-scale public event while maintaining the personal touches that made the ceremony meaningful for the family. As the formal processional concluded, these behind-the-scenes efforts became visible in the seamless transition from public ceremony to private family time. The children were reunited with their parents after having spent the day in carefully supervised activities that kept them engaged while protecting them from the most intense aspects of the public mourning process. The late afternoon brought a reception for international guests and family members who had traveled great distances to participate in the farewell ceremony. William and Kate moved through these interactions with renewed energy, drawing on reserves of social grace that their years of public life had developed. Each conversation required sensitivity to the different relationships people had with the person being honored, and they worked to acknowledge these varied connections while maintaining appropriate protocol for such a formal occasion. Private family time became especially precious as the day's formal obligations drew to a close. The extended family gathered in smaller groups throughout the palace, sharing memories and processing the emotional impact of the day's events. Children played quietly nearby while adults talked in hushed tones about practical matters that would need attention in the coming weeks and months. Kate noticed how these informal interactions provided a necessary balance to the public formality that had dominated most of the day. Evening brought the opportunity to review photographs and video footage from the day's events, allowing William and Kate to see their experience from the perspective of the people who had witnessed it. The images revealed moments they had been too focused on other things to fully appreciate while they were happening, and they found themselves moved by evidence of the genuine affection and respect that the public had shown throughout the farewell process. The children shared their own experiences of the day over a quiet family dinner, describing what they had seen and heard and asking questions about details that had puzzled or impressed them. William and Kate used these conversations to help their children process what had been an extraordinary day in their young lives, working to place the public ceremony in the context of their private family relationships and their understanding of loss and remembrance. Letters and messages of condolence continued to arrive throughout the day, requiring staff coordination to manage the volume, while ensuring that significant communications received appropriate attention. Kate spent time reviewing a selection of these messages, finding comfort in the thoughtful words that people had taken time to write during their own busy lives. The diversity of these tributes reflected the broad impact that their loss had created across many different communities and relationships. As night fell over the palace, William and Kate took time for private reflection about what the day had meant and what the completion of the formal farewell process would mean for their future responsibilities. The transition from public mourning to ongoing memorial would require different kinds of energy and attention, and they used these quiet evening hours to begin preparing emotionally for the next phase of their journey through grief and duty. The day concluded with a sense of accomplishment about having honored their responsibilities to both their private family relationships and their public roles. Tomorrow would bring a return to more normal routines, but it would be a different kind of normal, shaped by the changes that the day's ceremony had formally acknowledged. William and Kate prepared for sleep, knowing that they had met the challenge of this significant day with the grace and dignity that the situation had required while remaining true to their own values and their commitment to each other and their family. The weeks that followed brought a different kind of challenge as William and Kate adjusted to life after the formal farewell ceremonies had concluded. The intense public attention gradually decreased, but their private process of grief and adjustment continued in the quieter spaces between their official obligations. They found themselves learning to navigate a new normal that honored what they had lost, while embracing the responsibilities and opportunities that remained ahead of them. The palace grounds seemed different somehow, carrying the memory of recent events while slowly returning to the rhythms of daily life. Mourning routines took on new significance as William and Kate established patterns that would sustain them through this period of transition. Kate noticed how small rituals like breakfast with the children or evening walks in the garden provided anchoring points in days that sometimes felt unpredictable or emotionally complex. William developed a practice of spending time in his study each morning, using the quiet hours to prepare mentally for whatever the day might bring while maintaining his connection to the broader purposes that gave meaning to their public roles. The children adapted to the changes in their family life with the resilience that young people often demonstrate during difficult times. Their questions evolved from immediate concerns about the ceremonies and public attention to deeper inquiries about memory, legacy, and how families maintain connections across time. William and Kate worked together to provide honest but age-appropriate guidance, helping their children understand that grief is a process rather than a single event, and that honoring those we lose becomes part of how we live going forward. Public engagement resumed gradually, with carefully selected appearances that allowed William and Kate to demonstrate their continued commitment to their royal duties, while respecting their need for time to process recent events. These interactions showed the public that while they had been changed by their experience of loss, they remained dedicated to their roles and responsive to the needs of the people and causes they served. The warmth they received during these appearances confirmed that their handling of the farewell process had strengthened rather than diminished their connection with the public. Letters and messages of support continued to arrive from around the world, requiring ongoing attention from palace staff and thoughtful responses from William and Kate themselves. They made time to read a selection of these communications personally, finding inspiration in the ways people shared their own experiences of loss and resilience. Kate began to see patterns in these messages that suggested opportunities for future charitable work, focused on supporting others through similar experiences of grief and transition. Family relationships took on new dimensions as extended family members found different ways to maintain connections that honored shared memories while respecting individual needs for space and processing time. Sunday dinners became more intentionally organized, providing regular opportunities for conversation and mutual support, without the pressure of formal occasions. The children enjoyed having their cousins visit more frequently, and these interactions helped normalize their experience of loss by placing it within the context of ongoing family relationships. Private time together became increasingly important, as William and Kate recognized that their public roles required them to present a composed and capable front even when they were still processing their private emotions. Evening conversations allowed them to share concerns and observations that they couldn't express publicly, maintaining the honest communication that had always strengthened their partnership. They developed new appreciation for quiet moments that had once seemed ordinary, but now felt precious because of their recent reminder of life's uncertainty. The palace staff adapted to the subtle changes in daily routines and priorities that resulted from the family's experience of public mourning and private grief. Long-serving employees demonstrated their understanding of the delicate balance between providing necessary support and respecting the family's need for privacy during their adjustment period. New staff members learned quickly that their roles involved not just practical assistance but also the discretion and sensitivity that royal service requires during both ordinary and extraordinary times. Charitable commitments provided meaningful structure for William and Kate's return to full public engagement, allowing them to channel their renewed awareness of life's preciousness into work that honored the values and causes they had always supported. Their appearances at various events carried additional weight because of recent experiences, and they found that their capacity for empathy and connection with people facing difficulties had been deepened by their own journey through loss and public scrutiny. As months passed, William and Kate discovered that the farewell process they had navigated with such care had not been an ending, but rather a transformation. Their public roles continued, but were informed by new understanding of resilience and grace under pressure. Their family relationships had been tested, but emerged stronger because of shared experience and mutual support. The palace routines resumed but carried forward the lessons learned about what matters most during life's most challenging moments. Looking back, they could see that the period of sorrow and formal farewell had taught them valuable lessons about leadership, family, and the relationship between public duty and private authenticity. The grace they had shown during their most difficult days became a foundation for continued service, and their ability to maintain dignity while remaining genuinely human had deepened their connection with the people they served. The farewell had been filled with sorrow, but it had also been filled with grace, and that combination had carried them through to a new chapter of their lives together.